Obsession is the latest misandry horror film. And the first time I saw it was on this channel here, Cobwebs. I forget his actual name. I like him, I like his stuff, but nevertheless, he's the kind of guy who doesn't realize that the film's propaganda is targeted towards him. He says it can't be me that they're talking about, but it is, dude. You're one of these nice guys that the maker of these films hate with a passion. You're the kind of nice person that makes women puke. Okay? Now, when he showed me the film, I said, I can see the misandry. And just to bolster it, look at this by Nightmare MasterClass. Why incels don't understand obsession. Really, you don't understand obsession? I guess I'm not an incel like you then, Nightmare, because I understand it's evil propaganda from the beginning. And look at these, how obsession exposes nice guys as predators. There you go. These women are saying it out. Obsession perfect explains the nice guy culture. See, our nature as human beings, as men, it's a culture, guys, right? Anyway, Cobwebs, let's see what this film is about.
Started.
I was calling to see if there's a way I can cancel her wish.
I'm sorry, we don't really do that.
So she's just stuck like this forever?
Well, yeah, I mean, as long as you live.
Wow, that's interesting. I played that for basically this guy has wished this woman he's in love with loves him back, right? And of course, because men aren't seen as human beings or deserving of love, it's always put in a bad light. This is basically a monkey's paw movie. Have you heard of monkey's paw? They gave you 3 wishes, but the wishes would always backfire on you, right? But of course, it's not about the monkey paw, backfiring. It's about this guy being a bad person, right? And this guy represents you and me. That's what they're leaving out. They're representing you, Cobwebs. Now let's get into this incel and see what he has to say. It's painful. Don't worry, I won't show the whole thing. It's an overly long video just for him to demonize guys like himself. Let's hear from this. Oh, by the way, this guy doesn't look like an incel, does he? Bald cap. He looks like he's in the basement of his mother's house, comic books. Yeah, he's not the guy that this movie is geared towards. But anyway, let's get into this.
Do a deeper dive on Obsession, the new Curry Barker film starring Michael Johnston and Indy Navarrete. I made a video on this one a bit ago covering my basic take on the film, the grandmother's house, the prescription pills, the male loneliness stuff. You can find that.
Oh, the male loneliness stuff, eh? But that would include you, dude. There's no way you're convincing me you're banging all the chicks.
Linked in the description if you want more context. I've spent more time with the film since then. Perhaps more importantly, I've bared witness to some deeply disturbing reactions to this film that I want.
Disturbing, right? In other words, guys actually started identifying with the guy, right? And that's disturbing.
I want to take some time to unpack.
You notice all these guys got to unpack something like it's real complex. There's nothing complex about your bigotry, dude. You quisling. There's nothing complex about your bigotry. You hate your fellow man. You're the kind of guy this film is talking about. But no, it can't be you. It's all these other guys, right?
This video is going to be spoilers all the way through, so I'm just warning you up front. If you haven't seen Obsession yet and you don't want it ruined, I would suggest you go watch it first.
What makes you think I'd pay good money to watch propaganda against myself? But anyway, let's get into it. Does Bear deserve sympathy? He's the protagonist, right? Who made this monkey's paw wish.
Want to talk about is this take on the film that I've heard. Basically, the idea is that Bear, the protagonist, deserves more sympathy. This is especially telling in reaction to my video because
Not more sympathy. He deserves sympathy. He's a lonely guy pandering for some woman, so he made some wish, and it came true. This nerd right here, this incel nerd, he wants some woman to love him as he is. That's his wish, too. That's why he's willing to join the feminists and bashing his fellow man in desperate hopes that some woman will pay attention to him. You do realize, incel, that you are the kind of guy this movie's about. I would not stoop as low as you're doing now.
I never actually said in my review that I thought Bear was like the villain of this film, although he does do some incredibly depraved things as the film progresses. I think that it's a bit more nuanced. It's not black and white, but
Beware that word nuance, dude. Guys, beware that word.
there is a strain of commentary about this film that wants Bear to be kind of off the hook. That was a common theme among some of the comments I received. The argument goes, I guess, that he's a sad, lonely guy. He made one mistake, and the universe handed him a magic object he didn't fully understand. Reading him as anything worse than that is uncharitable. That's kind of that.
Well, actually, that's why I brought up Cobwebs first, because that scene he showed, where is Cobwebs? The guy actually asked, hey, can you undo this wish? Right? He didn't know what he was getting into, according to that scene. So you watch this film, dude. Are they right?
That's the general sentiment of some of the comments I've received. You know, he didn't mean for any of this to happen, right?
So the guys who made these comments, they are the good guys. You're the nice guy this film is talking about. You're the guy who wants to throw out other men under the bus to try and appeal to women. You're the nice guy they're talking about.
Okay. Bear is sympathetic. Yes, I agree. But the film makes him sympathetic on purpose. It's a trap. The film is not
Yeah, it's a propaganda piece, hit piece, exactly, against the average guy like you and me. Well, not like you and me. You're beneath me. I would never do to my fellow man what you're doing now.
asking you whether Bear is a nice guy. The film is asking you what a nice guy does when they're handed the means to violate someone else's autonomy.
Now see what this quisling does, right? So if he's wishing that she'd love him, in his mind, she's doing it willingly. Right? But of course, now this guy, being a man-hater, frames it as taking away her autonomy. This is feminist speak 101, right? This is patriarchy speak. Men are holding women down, right?
wishes for Nikki to love him more than anyone in the world. It's actually inscribed in the wish itself. This is him consciously saying, yes, if I had the option, I would override her autonomy. I would.
No. He didn't say that, douchebag. What a bold-faced lie for you to say. He's just wishing that she would love him. He's not wishing that she doesn't have free will. You want the same wish. Are you coming to women and saying, I'm standing up for myself as a man, I'm a good person, why don't you date me? No, you're saying I'm better than all these other guys. Even though we're carbon copies of one another, I'm just better than them. The male feminist is the lowest order of life on the planet.
Override what she wants whatever it happens to be, because he's too cowardly to really find out. But yes, I will override whatever she happens to want with.
Men have perfectly good reason to be afraid not to put out. Because men know in their heart of hearts that they're not talking to equals. The women are above us. Also, the men don't want to suffer rejection because rejection hurts, just like you. Where's your girlfriend, dude? Right? Mother's basement. And also, there's danger to rejection. You hit on a woman, she decides she just wants to destroy you for shits and giggles. She can. She can just make up a story about you and it's over. Guys have all the right reasons to fear not bothering with the opposite sex in that regard, right? That's why the guy went for the wish.
My wish. That is what he expresses at that time. He wants her to be stripped of the ability not to love him.
No, and says who? Says you. So I would put it in a positive light, which it is. He wants her to love him. Notice how this quisling puts it. He says, oh, he wants her to strip her ability of not to love him. So you're admitting, dude, that women don't like men. Thank you for admitting that. But if I say it outright like I am, you would call me an incel, even though you're the incel, right? You're not getting laid. But you would call me an incel. You'd say, this guy doesn't know his place.
The fact that he didn't predict the specific consequences of that wish doesn't really negate the fact that he made the wish. And again,
yes, dude, since you can't predict that it was going to be a monkey's paw, he isn't to blame.
and I think it is telling that I received so many responses trying to defend Bear, the protagonist.
Well, I'm not trying to. I just am. I defend my fellow man. This guy wasn't guilty of anything but self-loathing, right? But his self-loathing was placed on him by society. It's years of abuse from society, right? But of course, you're saying, sorry, he's to blame for things that are outside his control. All messengers say this to guys. Right?
And I didn't even particularly make a solid case that Bear is notably evil.
Dude, for them to say this means they caught exactly what you're trying to say. I can see it right now. You're a misandrist. They could see that you're attacking this guy and they're coming out to defend him because they were defending themselves. And because you're such a self-loathing male feminist hater, you don't even know how to defend yourself. All you know, you quisling, is to throw other men under the bus, hoping, desperately hoping that some woman would, pay attention to you. You're the nice guy. Okay, let's get beyond this. I'm like I said, I don't need to go through all this hateful rhetoric here. Okay, the company. This is why I showed you that at the beginning, right?
To it, ultimately, you need to start thinking in metaphorical terms when you watch a film like this. When you see that kind of heightened reality, what is being conveyed, what is being kind of telegraphed to you in the audience is not that you should be interpreting what is happening literally. People need to stop being so literal.
So metaphorically, he made a wish and she just became obsessed with him? He's talking about the company. Okay. The company that gave him a wish, right? They're metaphorical now? This guy is a real MasterClass. That's what he calls himself, guys.
One particularly insane comment I received was trying to argue that everyone needs to stop being so hard on Bear because actually the company is liable. The company that created One Wish Willow.
So this logic he brought up, it's insane because it doesn't follow your hateful propaganda
is liable. I mean, some people watching this film, they want to redirect responsibility for what happens to Nikki onto this company. So the logic is like the corporation makes the product is dangerous. The help desk is apparently staffed by one bored guy who clearly doesn't give a shit.
Is he bored or is depressed? He sounds depressed to me.
So where's the liability? Is there going to be a class action lawsuit against the company that made One Wish Willow? This relates to what I was saying before about taking the film too literally. The company that made One Wish Willow is not really a character in this film.
Either it did it or it didn't. Either it's real in the film or it isn't. The guy made a wish. If it wasn't the company who gave it to him, who gave it to him? Now, this is why I'm going to play this from Cobweb's channel again, because you're going to show you that the company makes the rules.
I was calling to see if there's a way I can cancel a wish.
I'm sorry.
Wow, he's not a very nice guy, is he? He wants to cancel the wish. It seems to me this guy is taking charge and doing what he can under his power.
We don't really do that.
So she's just stuck like this forever?
Well, yeah, I mean, as long as you live.
As long as you live. So the company makes the rules. And these rules, these rules are out of his control. You are aware people can watch clips, right?
Kind of just a vehicle to deliver the story. The film needs Bear to have access to a wish. So the film puts a wish vending business in the setting. There is perhaps a bit of corporate satire going on here.
No, there's no corporate satire going on here. This is a propaganda hit piece against the common man. Don't even bother, you incel. You incel quisling. Now, that's why I'm so glad to see that scene there. Because that scene proves that this guy isn't to blame. He didn't know it was a monkey's paw. For all you guys who never heard of the monkey paw stories, it's a monkey paw it was an item that gave 3 wishes, and the wishes always came back in a harmful way. So this is a monkey's paw. The guy had no idea it was going to do this. He wants to undo the wish, and they're not going to allow him. As long as you live, in other words, he'd have to take his life. And this is part of the propaganda too. These films want to give the message that to the average guy, like this incel quisling, you should rope yourself. You should rope yourself. You're unworthy of love. You should rope yourself. Did you hear that, Cobwebs? Where are you? You're the kind of guy this film is aimed at. It's propaganda. And they're saying if you're just a nerdy, low-status guy, you should rope yourself. That's the messaging. Of course, guys like you don't want to hear that. Anyway, back to this quisling.
But it's kind of ambient. The help desk scene is funny because it's kind of absurd, not because the film is gearing up to make an argument about like
Okay, I'm getting by this. It's not talking about that at all. Okay, what's this next one? Bear has friends, right? Kind of like you. I see you surrounded by all your male friends. Anyway, let's go. Let's hear
turned
this.
all the way down, I think. Like there's something going on. You're missing something critical here. So I talk a lot about the so-called male loneliness epidemic in my first video, and
well, you'd be a part of it, dude. There's no way you're convincing me you're banging all the chicks.
a few people responded by trying to
Guys, do you think this guy is getting the babes in his mother's basements with his comic rack and his no doubt disappearing hairline and his rounded jaw? Do you think he's banging all the chicks? No. So what's his strategy? Hey, what's your name again? Nightmare MasterClass. Hey, MasterClass, are you coming up to these women and just hitting on them and being honest and dealing with rejection? Or are you just slamming all the other guys just like yourself as a male feminist? Is that your dating strategy.
Galaxy brain this take and say like, well, actually it's not about male loneliness because Bear has friends. He has Ian, right? And Sarah and Nikki, and they go out to trivia night. So this is not the portrait of someone who is an incel. This is not the portrait of someone who is prototypically associated with the so-called male loneliness epidemic.
They seem to be making a good point. Now, how are you going to spin this?
This is troubling to me as well because the film is practically beating you over the head with the fact that all of Bear's relationships are somewhat superficial in this.
Well, actually, that would map onto reality. The average guy does have to deal with superficial relationships. Most male friendships are superficial.
Film. If you look at Bear's relationship with Ian for like 30 seconds, I think you will realize this. Ian has been sleeping with the woman that Bear is in love with, and he's never told him. Ian gives Bear deliberately bad advice.
So he's got this male friend who isn't a friend. He's actually an enemy. And people shouldn't have sympathy for Bear because why again?
About how to approach Nikki. He tells him to call her by a nickname that she hates. He tries to
He's the opposite of a wingman. He's a cock blocker. Okay.
convince Bear not to ask Nikki out at trivia night. He interrupts him when he tries to.
Right.
Ian is quietly sabotaging Bear's life as a baseline social practice.
So if he's doing that, how can you blame Bear for being too afraid to approach this woman if other people are actually working against him? Notice this old Mott and Bailey trick, guys, right? Bear, he's just too afraid to do it. It's all his own self-loathing. Oh yeah, and here are these people who are cock blocking and working against him.
And Bear cannot see it really.
Part of the bigoted hit piece is the gaslighting. You're part of it too. Know what makes me happy is that you will not gain any success from doing this, quisling. You will remain the incel that you are, no matter how many other men you throw out under the bus.
Because he has no calibration for what friendship is supposed to feel like. When the
Oh, really? So the film showed him in his childhood not having any male friends as a little boy? Or are you talking about after puberty? How would you know this?
goes sideways and Bear finally asks Ian for help, Ian doesn't believe him and subsequently wishes for $1 billion on a lark. That says all you need to say about the friendship. And that's the friendship Bear has been investing in. That's the guy he's been showing up with for trivia night for years.
So I guess you were right and they were wrong in so much that he is suffering a loneliness epidemic. He doesn't have any male friends. Maybe he should be friends with you. Some guy who's going to destroy him, right?
And when Bear finally needs him for something, not something small, the literal life of the woman they both supposedly care about, Ian uses this wish to enrich himself.
See, this is part of the propaganda too, which Incel quisling doesn't recognize. All men are being targeted as bad people. It's supposed to be the nice guy, right? Bear. But even this guy who is getting lucky, who is actually able to attract a woman, he's a bad guy too. Because he doesn't help his friend and he's only interested in money. So this hate film attacks all men. So you're exposing it for what it is.
That is the actual on-screen content of the closest male relationship in Bear's life. I have a couple of best friends that
Okay. Forget you. If you have a best friend, I feel sorry for them. Because obviously you're this guy he's talking about, right? You're Bear's friend. What about Sarah? Oh, now this is the biggest gaslighting, right? There's this woman in the show that actually loves him, everybody, and he's just going to magically not go for her, right?
Any real relationships. This is a common theme throughout the film. Now, potentially, of course, there is the possibility of Bear having a relationship with Sarah. This is another thing that people brought up. But
If he had that possibility, he would have went for it. This is another batch of gaslighting. That there's this really good girl that's for every guy, and you're just ignoring her.
if Bear is so blinkered by his fixation on Nikki that he cannot see that Sarah is offering him something more, the film kills her halfway through the third act precisely because Bear could not recognize what she was offering him in the first place, you know?
Well, I call that bullshit. The guy who wrote this is full of it. He's not writing reality.
If he had recognized that, none of this would have happened and they wouldn't be in this situation.
See, you're the blame guys, right? You nice guys. There are these good women out here and they're just hitting on you and you just don't have the capability to recognize them, see their inner soul, right? Dude, the loneliness epidemic wouldn't be a thing if that was in reality. You incel quisling.
What I will say is I very conspicuously avoided talking about Sarah in my initial review,
Of course you did. Of course you did.
and that's my bad. Sarah is a genuinely.
So they had to bring this up and they called you out. Now you have to try and do damage control, right? You misandrist. Let's see. I'm not going to go through all of this. Closing thoughts, if only, right?
The titular obsession, these are not two separate things. The obsession is what the friendship deficit produces when that emotional energy has nowhere else to go. I'm excited to watch this movie again, honestly.
Wow. You're excited to watch a bigoted hate piece against you. Oh, sorry, this isn't about you. This is just what every other guy looks like you, right? And you're excited. My man Eric Schiedler said, Gen Z, he said, this generation will be the ones to break free. I hope he's right. But Gen Z is also producing a lot of misandrists, a lot of guys like this character here, desperate guys. He's the nice guy that he thinks this film is talking to or attacking. He's the one who's willing to throw other men under the bus in this desperate hopes that some woman will get a pat on the head, will give him a pat on the head. Like, oh my God, what male feminists are the lowest form of life on the planet. Even if you don't call yourself one, that's what you are, incel quisling. You're the type of guy who'll be a boat anchor to other men coming to realization and breaking free of the misandry.
I'm still thinking about it a few days later. I'm really excited to see what Curry Barker does next because he is perhaps one of the most promising upcoming horror directors that I can think of right now.
So you see this bigot as promising. Right. What I say, I made a video talking about Ghostbusters 2016. That's 10 years ago. And I predicted that in 2026, it'd still be happening. And here we are. 10 years later, and it's still going. And this is the type of guy that explains why it's still going. The guy's up there, like, talking to him, leaving these disturbing comments, right? Like these guys pointing out, like, this guy, he's just a lonely guy. He gave into temptation. He didn't know what he was into. Everything they said was factual, right? You see, those guys, they're the bad guys. This is the good guy. Guys like him. Guys who support the misandry, make excuses for the misandry, shares the bigotry, shares the propaganda. Well, guys, if you see this character, don't be him. And you're not escaping from this either, cobwebs. Because you're the type of guy I pointed out that this misandry exists, and you just said this won't happen to me. You didn't say it's wrong. You didn't say, yeah, something has to be done about this. You just said it wouldn't happen to me, so it's okay. So you're another incel quisling. Oh, by the way, I think this guy actually bribed some woman to leech off him. I think he's married. So he'll probably say, I can't be an incel, I'm married. Well, dude, married men get called incels all the time. And they get called it when they don't know their place. If you turned around and agreed with me, you would be called an incel. So your idea of not being an incel is to support the misandry. I guarantee you, Cobweb's channel supports the misandry. Anyway, guys, Gen Zers, I'm close enough saying, look, I'm glad to be as old as I am because I didn't grow up in this disgusting post-millennial misandry that you guys are. But you guys, you were born into this. Break free.